Deathworlders to the Extreme by Aqua Star Dark. Chapter 16 Grooming and Names. Shinto gets bored and realizes he's a mess. Additional boredom results in introductions. It was official. Hitoshi was completely and utterly bored. After Eraser had finished talking into the little device, he had just laid his head on the ground and did nothing, and forced Hitoshi to do nothing for at least 2 hours straight. Whenever Hitoshi tried to get up or walk around a bit, Eraser looked over at him and stared, and then tugged him down with his scarf. Sure, Hitoshi could have gotten up anyway, and he almost did a couple times. But then Eraser freaking whined, and he felt so bad he would stop trying to escape. But now Hitoshi was considering just sprinting off into the trees, because if he had to stay so still for an hour more, he would literally go insane. Hitoshi groaned and flopped over, staring blankly at the wreckage. Nothing more than a pile of wood and scraps at this point, before plopping his face into the dirt. Eraser, I'm bored. His voice was muffled through the ground, and when Hitoshi glanced up, Eraser hadn't changed his position from earlier. Hitoshi groaned and ran a hand past Eraser's scarf and through his hair, only to find it rough with bits and pieces of stuff stuck in it. Hitoshi glanced at his hand and winced at the coating of dust it was now layered with. Dust that was now in his cut as well. Ugh, I don't want that to get infected. I need my hands. Eraser whined as Hitoshi unwound his scarf from his head, and even more so when he started to move. But Hitoshi stuck out his tongue as he crawled over to his backpack and plunged his hand into the water. The water stung on his cuts, but he washed them away anyway as Eraser watched him squeeze a few droplets into his head and brush out some of the larger debris. Metal, wood, leaves, they were all on Hitoshi's head with dust and dirt that clung to the purple strand of Hitoshi's hair. Hitoshi switched between combing his fingers through his hair and washing his cuts in the water, and all while Eraser watched him until he finally got the last bits of debris out, though he could do nothing about the dust beyond dunking his head into the water. Should I do it? Pondered Hitoshi as he stared at the inside of the nut, trying to stop himself from brushing a hand through his hair as the other hand gripped into Eraser's scarf, trying to stop it from tying itself around his head again. Maybe I should. Hitoshi yelped at the tongue that licked up from the front of his hair the moment he turned around, and blinked at Eraser, who somehow migrated to sit right behind his crouched form. Hitoshi sat, frozen, as Eraser carefully moved closer and blankly obeyed when the cat alien positioned him to face away. Oh, he's grooming me! Was I that dirty? Thought Hitoshi as he blankly stared at the ground. Eraser grooming the dust-ridden mop that was his hair. Eraser's tongue wasn't like sandpaper like the one that cats on Earth had, but it was still somewhat rough, as Hitoshi felt the miniature bumps brush away the dust that settled on his head, and sat there frozen until Eraser deemed him fully groomed. Hitoshi stared at the ground in shock, until Eraser guided him back into a laying position before doing so himself, as if he didn't just spend a dozen minutes grooming all the dust and dirt out of Hitoshi's now clean hair. Okay, that just happened, he thought, blankly staring up at the sky. I guess I can get groomed by an alien cat to my resume. The shock of actually being groomed by an alien cat was enough to get Hitoshi to lay still for at least another hour before the choking sense of boredom reared its head once again. Hitoshi groaned. If only I could talk to Eraser. Then at least we could talk while resting. A sudden bout of inspiration struck Hitoshi, and he abruptly sat up, startling Eraser, who quickly turned to face him. It won't work. Don't get your hopes up for nothing. Shinso Hitoshi, said Hitoshi, holding a hand to his chest as Eraser stared. Shinso Hitoshi. For a moment or two, there was silence between them, as Hitoshi stared at the cat alien. Then, Shinso Hitoshi, said Eraser slowly, his mouth fumbling awkwardly over the syllables as he sat up. His ears faced Hitoshi with full attention. Hitoshi stared at Eraser. I didn't think he would reply. He replied. He'd reply. He replied. He gleefully squealed internally. Shinso Hitoshi, he repeated, fighting down the full-blown grin that threatened to overcome his face. Shinso Hitoshi. Toshi. Eraser growled as he fumbled over Hitoshi's family name. But Hitoshi didn't care, as he released a full-blown purr at Eraser's attempt. Shinso Hitoshi, he repeated, his hidden grin breaking through the walls of its confinement. Eraser flicked back, ears pinned, and stared at Hitoshi for a moment before the edges of his mouth began to slowly wide open, revealing a full maw of sharp teeth and a door that opened wider and wider until Eraser's face was painted with the most awkward Totoro-looking grin Hitoshi had ever seen. Shinso Hitoshi. Hitoshi purred as Eraser pronounced his name, and the cat Shinso Hitoshi. Eraser purred as Eraser pronounced his name, and the cat alien dropped the grin as he purred back at Hitoshi. Shinso Hitoshi, he said, pointing at Hitoshi with a careful paw. Hitoshi eagerly nodded. Shinso Hitoshi. He placed his hand on his chest and silently pointed it toward Eraser. Aizawa Shota, said Eraser, or Aizawa, as he carefully lay a paw on his chest as Hitoshi innerly screamed with glee. Aizawa Shota? Tried Hitoshi, blinking as Eraser stared at him with his mouth dropped open. Aizawa Shota, he repeated after a moment of hesitation. Aizawa Shota. Aizawa purred at him, and Hitoshi grinned in his victory. Finally, I know what his name is. Aizawa returned Hitoshi's grin with one wide-faced grin of his own, though his ears twitched at the motion for some reason. Deathworlder kits are so energetic, groaned Shota as he stopped the Deathworlder from getting up again with a well-placed pat of his scarf. It looked at him, indignant, most likely before obeying as Shota unleashed a whine upon the creature. Unexpectedly and fortunately, he found that whining when the Deathworlder did anything irresponsible or against Shota's will, whining was more than enough to get it back in line. I guess the adults of its species whine if they're young and displeased. That's useful, he thought, basking in the sunlight. Because Vimos evolved in desert-like areas. The warmth of the sun reminded him somewhat of home, and if he just closed everything off and the sounds of his thoughts, it's colder than home. As if that planet was ever home to me. The Deathworlder shifted again, chattering as it brushed past Shota's scarf to play with the hair on its head. Shota ignored it. As long as it wasn't walking around, he didn't care. He didn't care what it did while resting. So as long as it actually rested its injuries. Huh. Is this what recovery girl Is this what recovery girl feels most of the time? Wow, I must have been such a pain. Wait, despite Shota's grip, the Death Worlder was unwrapping its scarf from its wounds. Why? Shota whines, his displeasure but this time the Death Worlder didn't heed its calls, and only stuck out its tongue. A bleep? Why is it blipping? Why is it blepping? The Death Worlder kept close to the ground as it approached the water container and stayed so as it plunged a hand into its depth. It must have been thirsty then? Thirsty then? The Death Worlder ignored Shota's gaze as it played with its hand in the water before passing its hand and pinned it through its mane and began to groom itself. Whoa. Whoa. It is filthy. Filthy. Sure, Shota wasn't one to care much for his hygiene, but all that debris and dust in the Death Worlder's mane? It must have been incredibly uncomfortable. Silently approaching, Shota watched as the Death Worlder switched between grooming its mane and wetting its hands. To simulate the wetness of a tongue or something similar, perhaps? He considered as the Death Worlder dips its hand once again. Considering the cuts in the Death Worlder's hands, it wouldn't be good for the Death Worlder if it infected its wound by grooming itself. Not at all. It's so young. It's so young. I doubt it knows how to groom itself yet. I'll do it. Shota decided, only hesitating for a moment when he remembered the bright coloring of the Death Worlder's mane. I thought it might be poisonous or venomous, but considering I've been in contact with its skin and have been perfectly fine, I should be alright for me to groom it. If it doesn't have venom either, it's possible the color is just to help it to attract a mate for when it's older. His mind made up, Shota groomed the front part of the Death Worlder's mane. The moment it turned around, the wide-eyed kitten, like surprise that came over its face when it yelped, was admittedly adorable. As Shota positioned it to be easier to groom, and he got it to work, it stayed frozen the entire time. Likely the result of its parents doing something similar before. Shota felt his ears droop. The grim reality of the situation was that this was a youngling that had been taken from its home and likely from its parents as well. If that were to happen to Shota when he was a kid, well, he doubted he would have survived as long as the Death Worlder had. Just the fact it's a Death Worlder has helped it keep it alive, I guess. Eventually, as the thoughts kept his mind occupied, Shota finished grooming the Death Worlder of the dust and debris that coated its mane and returned to where he'd laid earlier, forcing the Death Worlder to come lie down as he did so. It was still quiet and frozen from where he began grooming it and stayed so for nearly a whir until suddenly sat up staring at Shota. It lifted a hand to its chest and staring with narrowed eyes spoke. Shinso Hitoshi. That's the end of chapter 16, and now we're on chapter 17, Learning in Pain. Summary. Shinso and Aizawa introduce themselves to each other and learn each other's ages. Things dissolve after that. Shinso Hitoshi, the Death Worlder repeated, hand still on its chest as it dramatically enunciated its words. Shota's mind spun. Is it trying to tell me something? Is that a sickness? Is he... Then it clicked. Oh. Shota thought dumbly. That's it. That's its name. It's telling me its name. Shinso Hitoshi. The name felt odd in Shota's mouth as he sat up, and he knew from the moment it left its mouth that he'd mispronounced it. Even so, the Death Worlder, no. Shinso seemed delighted at his attempts and repeated their name for Shota to try again. Shinso Hitoshi. Shinso Hid Shinso Hitoshi. Shota growled, slightly frustrated at the way he instantly strung together the consonants of the name. Still, Shinto seemed glad at his attempt as they creepily purred at him, the edge of their mouths twitching. Shinso Hitoshi! Shinso Hitoshi! Shota flinched back, ears pinned, as Shinto bared their teeth at him with their repetition. No, don't overreact. For all you know, this isn't an aggression. That isn't aggression. You don't want them to get upset because you rejected them. So maybe return the gesture. It felt like firing a gun in an energy teapot as slowly Shota forced himself to bare his teeth at Shinso. Shinso Hitoshi. Shota forced out, sending Shinso into a brand new fit of purring. Shinso Hitoshi, said Shota, pointing a new paw at Shinso, to which Shinso responded by bobbing their head. Why would they bob their head? Excitement? Confirmation maybe? Shinso Hitoshi, Shinso repeated, placing a near hand on their chest before pointing that same hand at Shota, making a sound as they stared at him. It's my turn then. Aizawa Shota. Shota lay a paw on his chest as he introduced himself to the deathworlder. Aizawa Shota? Shota felt his mouth drop open as Shinso repeated back his name with near-perfect pronunciation. Mimicry, maybe? It's rare, but I wouldn't be surprised if it helped their species survive. Aizawa Shota. Shota eventually stated, his mind rushing. If they used mimicry, how much of a range does their vocal cords have? Is it possible that they could mimic voices even? A sudden thought occurred to Shota. Their purrs were odd. Is it possible that's the result of mimicry? Mimicry? If so, does that mean there's creatures like me on their planet? Did they purposely use sounds from those creatures to make communication easier? Maybe. Aizawa Shota. Aizawa purred at Shinso when he pronounced Aizawa Shota. Aizawa purred at Shinso when he pronounced Shota's name correctly, on only their second try, and Shinso bared his teeth at his like earlier. Shota returned the motion, though it still felt uncomfortable to do so at such a dangerous creature. Suddenly, the thought occurred to Shota. I wonder how old it actually is. What stage of development? Shinso glanced over as he tapped at the ground and began to sketch a line with his claw. A line that he divided into 3 sections as at one end, and one end sketched the head of a kitten with its eyes closed, and the other end a skull, making sure Shinso was still paying attention. Shinso glanced over as he tapped the ground and began to sketch a line with his claw, a line that he divided into 3 sections. At one end, to sketch the head of the kitten with its eyes closed, and at the other end a skull, making sure Shinso was still paying attention. Shota pointed at himself, then traced his claw from the kitten to a place a little way into the 3rd section. Shinso blinked as Shota created a small dot at his age, or at least his development, before pointing the paw toward Shinso. For a click or two, there was only silence as Shinso stared at the line and repeated Shota's motions before. Eventually, he began to mimic Shota's actions, though instead of ending at Shota's thought, he created one midway through the 2nd section. The section representing adolescence. Shota stared down at Shinso's dot for a moment. So, they're about the same age, evidently, anyway, as my students. Then, Shota buried his face into his scarf. I've been treating an adolescent as a kid then. Well, I guess it's warranted in the situation since we're trapped on an alien world, but still, I thought they were a kid. I thought they were a kid. I said that weird. Shinso tilted their head and laid a hand near Shota's face with a chirp. For a moment, Shota didn't reply. You really are a problem child, aren't you? How did you even get into this kind of situation? If you're an adolescent, were you even with your parents before you were taken? Shinso didn't reply, obviously, so Shota took matters into his own paws. Or into his own paws. Or paw, really, and drew a simplistic figure resembling Shinso, then drew a pair of larger ones next to it and drew a circle around the group, and drew the same picture but with a line between the longer ones and the little one, and tapped on each picture, then pointed at Shinso, who stared at him. They did nothing for a click before Shota realized that liquid began to leak from Shinso's eyes once more, as his breast shuddered. Oh no. Oh no. Did I upset them? Panicked Shota as he began to purr to the distressed deathworlder, wrapping his scarf around their head for a moment of consideration. I'm sorry. It must be a sensitive subject for you then. He cooed, leaning forward to gently groom the top of the Shinso's mane as he kept a gentle paw on the deathworlder's back. Shinso leaned into Shota's chest, whimpering. Once we can properly communicate, I can ask a little more carefully. How did asking about it elicit such a reaction though? Did they miss their parents? Did they not know them well enough and regret it? A sudden thought occurred to Shota. Was Shinso abandoned? You're okay. You're okay. You don't have to answer if it hurts. Carefully, Shota erased the picture with his tail. So many potential scenarios, but Shota had been insensitive to ask such a thing anyway. The priority at the moment was survival, and they couldn't do that if Shota was making the more suited of their partnership distress over his questions. So for now, he would offer the comfort he could. Jeez, Hisashi would tease me so much as he learned about this. Right after introductions, Hitoshi didn't expect much more to occur. But more did, as Aizawa began to sketch a line into the ground that had details slowly added to it as Hitoshi watched. There were two lines, both relatively close to each other, and one to the side. A side of the line on which Aizawa drew. A cat with its eyes closed? What is he asking me? He thought Toshi baffled. It wasn't until Aizawa drew a skull on the other side of the line that Toshi understood. He's asking about my lifespan. About my age, he realized. Aizawa pointed at himself, then trailed a claw along the line until a point after the second separation. The third section is adults, then created a dot there. If the last one is for adults, how exactly do the first two represent? The first two represent, pondered Hitoshi as he reenacted Aizawa's motions from earlier. Obviously they represent the younger stages of life, but which ones exactly? The first section can represent a baby, and the next one a kid, and the rest teenagehood and adulthood, if that's how Aizawa is phrasing it. But at the same time, Aizawa didn't go too far past the second line for his dot. And he's an adult, I think? Unless he's a teenager that stole a ship and that's why he crashed. Hitoshi tossed away that idea. I think the first section represents being a kid, maybe, and the second one, teenagehood, and the third is adulthood. Having finally figured it out, Hitoshi trailed his finger along the line until he reached approximately where he would sit in the teenagehood. If his assumptions were correct, anyway, and after a moment of silence, Aizawa buried his face into his scarf. That's an odd reaction. Maybe he thought I was an adult. Carefully, Hitoshi waved a hand near Aizawa's face and offered a chirp, to which the cat alien responded by saying something in his language after a moment of silence. When Hitoshi didn't respond, how was he supposed to if he didn't know what Aizawa was saying? Aizawa began drawing another thing in the dirt. 3 stick figures with a circle around them and another 3 with a line dividing the bigger ones. And the third in the middle is this a joke? What even is he trying to ask me? If I was still with my parents when I was taken? No, yes. My parents abandoned me, but I technically have guardians? How do I explain something like that? Should I? I didn't have a proper childhood, though. If anything, I was already alone. I was always alone. How? It wasn't until Aizawa began to purr, wrap his scarf around Hitoshi's head, that he realized he was crying. The sudden wave of pain and despair and great regret overwhelming him. Is he trying to comfort me? Comfort me? Wow, an alien cat really is the only thing acting like a parent in my life then. Toshi choked down a sob as he leaned to Aizawa as the cat alien pulled Hitoshi into a hug. Cooing before he began to grim the top of Hitoshi's head, something interrupted by only Aizawa saying something to Hitoshi, and the faint sound of shuffling dirt. Careful Aizawa's broken arm, Hitoshi leaned to the cat alien and returned the hug, letting himself feel for the first time in a while as he cried on the alien world. Okay, that's the end of it. I want to say something. Sorry that I haven't posted in a while. I was sick, like really sick. Bro, my voice was so wrecked. I sounded like I was some 6-year-old man who'd smoked since he was 13 every day. Like, you could barely understand what I was saying for the people who were in the room with me. So, I wasn't able to do podfics. Like, I'm still a bit sick right now. I don't know how long the sickness can last, but oh well. We'll see if I need to go to the doctor. But yeah, I'm sorry for not posting. I couldn't. Oh my gosh. Apparently I have a bad immune system now. But yeah, thanks for listening.